Hey everyone, just wanted to take a moment to shout out the passing of Scott Wampler. He passed away just a couple of hours ago, and we'd been listening to him for years now. He does a show over called the King Cast with Eric Besby. He also is working on a Hellraiser podcast. He was a frequent contributor to Fangoria, and one of the funniest guys on that terrible site called Twitter. He was an absolute force to be reckoned with. And it's not like I was his friend or anything, but I'll miss him in the kind of horror community. I think he touched a lot of people's lives that he didn't necessarily realize that he did. So if you're a King fan, if you're a Wampler fan, if you're an Eric Vespi fan, raise a glass today and drink a beer for him, listen to some Nine Inch Nails, and go out and do a project, because he always seemed like the type of guy who would just jump at the chance to do some weird project or something, and be very supportive of or other horror people. So to Scott.
The worst horror movie I ever saw was fucking great.
Hello and welcome to This May Hurt a Bit. My name is James Strayer and this is
John C. Myers.
And we are a horror franchise podcast discussing each film in popular and not so popular franchises. And today we're discussing the Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. And all of a sudden I felt like that was way too high energy and jubilant for what a downer of a film this is. Maybe I'll save that for part two. But the dour atmosphere of this film probably demands something a little bit more staid, like John Larroquette.
Yes.
Starting this out. You think we can get him before this goes live?
I'm sure we can get him in the next 5 minutes.
Okay, great.
Me and Johnny L, we go way back.
Yeah. I don't know. Best horror movie of all time. Case closed. Much like we said with Psycho.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
It's definitely, as I said at the end of the last one of my favorite movies as well, because it is just very few movies sort of have the powerful evil aura that this does.
It's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, there's something like I can watch Eraserhead and still think about like how it was made and the sets and everything. That still it transports you to another place, but it feels like a movie. This, even though I've read a lot about it, I know about the crappy work conditions, all that stuff, the human beings involved. It still just feels like it conjures up something.
The common go-to with this movie is like, it feels like a snuff film. And I think that kind of thing gets overused a bit, but every once in a while, like I'll watch one of these classics with an argument like that in mind, kind of with fresh eyes. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about that a little bit with this rewatch. And I don't know, I've seen this one 15 times in my life, maybe. Yeah. Something like that. Maybe more. But I think it's just, the movie feels like, I don't want to go so far as to say a documentary, but there's something about how the narrative unfolds that to me and the acting, that it does feel just like a camera placed in the middle of Texas and you uncovered something that you really shouldn't be seeing.
Yeah. And I think like that certainly Hooper was inspired by D.A. Pennebaker. And I think there is sort of that realism in it. I think there's also They know when to cut quick and when to not cut quick. And so much of this, as the editor, Sally Richardson, said, was made in post. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it's her and Hooper that are largely responsible for that. The other guy, J. Larry Carroll, who's credited there, like, should not be on there, frankly. Like he started editing it, then Hooper was like, this is all garbage.
Right.
Sally, who's also like AD and taking stills on the set, he was like, you fix this. And so I think there's that. I think there's like the way the camera moves that feels a little bit like you're spying on them. It's just got this very sort of matter of factness to it that drives the horror home rather than like necessarily like there's a lot of stylistic editing, but I think the locations, The actors themselves, like they all just feel very like real and rough.
Right.
And I mean, the film, it's shot on 16 millimeters. So that film quality is pretty scraggly. So it has just this very I think this might actually be happening feel to it.
What is it about that editing? I mean, you would know better than I, but like I've seen people talk about it, and it's not something that I can tangibly put my finger on, a point tangibly put my finger on, but just the idea of like, it says that like Toby would like cut a half a second or a half a beat before you think you should. And it's not like really a match on action type of cut. It's just something that just puts you off every time the cuts happen. And I don't know if you would call it subliminal, but like, I certainly don't like understand it or acknowledge it like in a first watch through, Right.
And I think some of that, like the same way that you might say that about jazz, where you're like, this is just bleating and blooping. And then you have a guy with a wrinkly brain going, aha,
right.
But this is brilliant. It's not always something that like you get, but I do think it's there. Particularly in some case more than others, where it's just you're like off kilter from sort of what you expect, not in this huge gigantic way, but it just it's just slightly off than what you might be expecting, what rhythm they might have already created at that point. I think you also have those weird elements that like when like Sally's being attacked or when some of the violence is happening, that you just have these quick cuts or like these reactions to things happening rather than seeing them happen, which makes them all the more terrible in your mind.
Sure.
You don't see the hook going into her back. You don't see, the guy's head getting cut off or whatever, but it feels bad. The one of the main times that you do is when Kirk dies, and that is a very quick, abrupt death, but it's just the aftermath that's awful and upsetting.
Yes.
I think it also lacks, this movie compared to these other ones that we've done, the more traditional slashers, really to come, because this was in the 70s. Like in the 80s with Jason, so much of that stuff ended up sort of drawing from giallo. So it has a lot more sexual thing, and that like there's a build up to the violence,
right,
and then an explosion of violence, whereas this is the violence just happens, and we know what's happened to Kirk. He goes inside, and then when Pam follows him, the terror is really from the location, not necessarily that she's in danger from Leatherface. And I think that's something that I like about this movie compared to a lot of other slashers. It feels less like just the physical harm, and it's more like your entire soul is at hazard.
Yeah.
You walk onto something that's just possibly bigger than you and more evil, and you have no idea what's going on.
God, there's so many things to run with there, but like, so I was, as far as the violence being so quick and immediate, like you were saying, I had this weird, stupid thing that I was watching this. I watched this a couple of times for us to talk about it. But then I remember I was thinking like Psycho came out only 5 years before going into this. I later realized I was wrong. I was off by 9 years. But like I had this weird thing that I was like comparing Psycho to this, which is like not completely out of the realm, but I was just think of that first big kill in Psycho where you get the overhead shot, you get him walking up the stairs, all that kind of stuff. And then the coming out and sudden, or even the shower kill is so different, and it's all about the suspense and then the breaking, which I think is like what you were saying about the slasher. This is just like a camera followed a guy into a room, a door open, and he gets pounded with a sledgehammer. Yeah, and it's so uncomfortable.
It's awful because it's not even
sexy. Not that, I don't want to go down the realm of like violence is sexy type of thing. That's for other people to discuss. But
right, I think there are parallel tracks there with that kind of, like I said, with the sort of build up. And plus, it's Italian. You're not going to be not horny.
Right. Yes.
Take that, Super Mario.
Yeah. It's me.
Hey, baby. But I do think that so like it also parallels the Psycho in that it is sort of a descent. You go from a sort of place of normality into a nightmare. Like it's a very slow draw. Like I don't even think we get the first kill till like 40 minutes into this movie.
Right.
Into an 83-minute movie.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like the film opens telling you what it's going to be. So it's not like the switch that Psycho was. But I also think it's sort of broad enough in its story, or simple enough in its story, that allows a lot of the more stylistic choices to really take forefront.
Yeah.
That you're not really caught up in plot so much. It's all fairly simple.
Oh, it's pretty straightforward. One thing that I was very much paying attention to in this is, would you call this a slasher film? So I feel like this comes before the big slasher glut of the late 70s, early 80s. I don't know. I guess you could call it a proto slasher or whatever. It's got so many of the tropes. You got your 5 teenagers in a van. You've got your harbinger, which I love. The harbinger who is actually like, well, there's maybe 2 harbingers. Like
there's
one of them,
a bunch of harbingers. Like, yeah,
right, yes,
including one who's in on it. Like,
who's in on it, sure. But
like Franklin in his own way is kind of a harbinger. He's the only one who sees the signs and is like, I don't know about this, and everyone's like, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, Leatherface became bigger than what he is, which happens in sequels, and we'll talk about that moving forward over this entire summer. Yay!
Summer chainsaw.
But he became in the Michael Myers, Jason, all that kind of stuff. But I think we can get into this in a moment of how different he is. But like, I was watching this time through from the lens of it being more of a folk horror movie. And just because I love folk horror stuff, but like, I think it has just as much to do with slasher as it does with folk horror, because you've got the people wandering into a rural area. The rural area has like, their old ways, which could be as simple as, sledgehammer versus nail gun for the slaughterhouse. You can go so far as to say like when the hitchhiker gets out and smears the bloody symbol, like somebody says that's kind of like an occult type of deal. Yeah. Even the discussion of astrology gets into like, they say like the planets are off and there's something different. So I don't know. I think I had a lot of fun watching it this way through as like a folk horror type of movie and less a slasher.
Yeah, I think it sort of transcends some of those genres. Like I remember the first time I saw this, I rented it with some high school buddies. We were just planning to watch a dumb slasher movie, be wiseacres about it.
And then you shut up, didn't you?
Yeah, we had been renting like, movies with lenticular covers like Jack Frost and Uncle Sam, and being like, yeah, whatever, this is going to be just the same as that. And then we're just like, oh, there's just silence throughout the whole thing.
Good.
Terrified. And so it didn't really feel like a traditional slasher in that sense, but I think, with the folk horror stuff, you have going to a new location, like, going back, so to speak, to a more rural thing and making some sort of transgression. There is a very interesting conversation between the film critic Walter Chow and John Darnell of the Mountain Goats you can find it on YouTube, about that very symbolism. John Darnell is
cool. Okay.
Yeah, has a whole thing about when he first saw it, like he was studying like the Greek tragedies. And so was talking about how like the thing that makes like a Greek tragedy is that not that bad things happen, is that they were inevitable. And goes on this whole thing about how he missed all this, how they missed all the signs and stuff like that. And there's lots of signs, but I kind of take issue with that because to me, there is all this mythic stuff going on. But you also have, the movie opens with this like, footage they bought from NASA of sunspots and stuff like that. And then you have a voiceover beyond the John Larroquette like opening read of the crawl of like, oh my God, this was so terrible. This like news report of like all these horrible things happening in the world. And certainly when this movie came out, like there was a lot going on.
Oh my God.
This was, like Vietnam, Watergate, oil crisis, all this stuff. Like, so it really felt like the American dream was already starting to fester, get ruined. And I think the sunspots also came from Hooper reading about weather and sunspots like affecting behavior. But to me, like all the symbols, all that stuff is all just red herrings. They're all meaningless.
Sure.
But like they're putting all this reading into stuff. And the reality is it's just us and this madness of the human race. And
so like astrology, you mean?
Yeah, like that's like, oh, well, this, I mean, because like there's all these things like, oh, the astrology says to it's going to be like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the reason this happened is because you went in that door.
Yes.
That's why that happened. It wasn't
Saturn
was
in
lined
retrograde.
Up against you. Yeah. It was you went in that door and then things fell apart from there. And it's not this like, it doesn't have the sort of petulant misanthropy of like a Lars von Trier where it's like, isn't this all bullshit? It is just like a cold call from the void of just, this is it. and this could happen to you at any moment, and it doesn't fucking matter. Goodbye, everybody.
Right. Yeah.
But it certainly like feels way worse. Like you feel that emptiness and the horror that like this might be it.
Yeah.
Because when the stuff really starts turning and you're with the family and they become this sort of weird, they become this dark version of what we've seen sort of Sally and Franklin and the friends, the mystery squad or the Scooby-Doo squad, whatever. You're getting these little pieces of their lives and stuff like that.
Right.
And that's almost more terrifying that they're not like, we're going to, sacrifice you to some dark god or something. It's like, no, it's just us.
Right. It's just them. And what was going on at the time? You were starting to go there with, we have Vietnam, we've got the civil rights movement, we have Whitman.
Yeah, Charles Whitman, being up on top of the bell tower.
Which Hooper was at. And like he was standing right next to a cop who got shot. When Whitman was like unloading onto a crowd. Which
is also interesting just in terms of what kind of a break this was for horror in terms of what horror was. Because you also have, around the same time, you have Peter Bogdanovich's Targets, which is essentially about that. It's eventually about that, like, you can't, it's the Boris Karloffs of the world aren't scary anymore. Now it's this stuff.
Right. Which was like a huge thing for this era of horror anyway, of just like, we're no longer in Transylvania. We're coming to your hotel with Norman Bates. It's good. We're rednecks in the woods.
Bringing up yet again, Death Dream, like where it's just the horrors at home and it's just a lot grimmer and darker than the sort of gothic stuff that came before.
Yeah.
Or the giant insects of the 1950s.
Oh, man. Are there any giant insect franchises that we need to have on our radar?
I know there's Phase 4, but there's not Phase 1, 2, or 3.
Damn it!
We'll match Phase 4 with Leonard Part 6.
Oh yeah! Speaking of a monster, whoo! Yeah. The radio transmissions are just such a favorite part of this movie to me. And I don't think I really picked up on them for like 1 or 2 viewings or so when I was younger. But every single time somebody hears the radio in a car or whatever, it's the most graphic, brutal, terrible stuff. Awful. And you don't pick up on every story or, word that they're saying, but it provides such an atmosphere. Yeah. And you start paying attention to it and you're like, God, I can't even take what's on the news right now, let alone what I'm watching.
Yeah. Lord knows. That's still currently true, but of course, But like it also just reminds me of, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. My grandparents lived in Scottsbluff, which is on the other side of the state.
Okay,
and it's a 8-hour drive of nothing. It's just corn.
Still in Nebraska.
And so it makes me think of, trying to find a radio station and finding news.
Right.
And there's, I don't know, are you familiar with Paul Harvey?
Oh, yeah. Paul Harvey. Yeah. Good Day.
Yeah, Good Day.
Yeah.
That he would always,
God, we're dating ourselves every episode.
Young people are into Paul Harvey. Right? That's still cool. 23 Skidoo.
Yeah.
No, but there was one that ended with like, because he would do some little like flavor text thing, a little like, the lighter side of the news or something goofy. But there was one where he ended it where he goes, like, it was so hot in like Tempe, Arizona today, or I forget where it was, but it's somewhere in the Southwest. A girl fell down on the pavement. She got up. Her skin did not. I'm Paul Harvey. Good day. And it was just,
that's incredible. I mean, that's a wonderful statement in a horror story. But like, if you know Paul Harvey, like that's a whole other thing, man.
Yeah, that's like you haven't seen your grandpa in years, and he shows up. It's like, oh, by the way, here's some horrible stuff. I'm still the same old. Here's a Werther's original.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of just horror just in that. What you're seeing is a part of this world, and it kind of gets lost because I think the sound design of this movie, which is fantastic, and one of the reasons it's fantastic, that the post-production sound was done by this guy Wayne Bell, and I was reading about him in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Companion. And he was like, well, I still think like some of the music could come up here. That would cast a spell. We'd mix it too low. I'm like, yep, you're a psychopath. You could not just walk away from it.
Right.
Perfect. That's exactly who we want. I mean, all sound guys are nuts in some degree.
Right.
But to have a guy that was like that dedicated, that's still 50 years later. I mean, when this book was written, it's probably like, 40 or something like that.
Right.
It's still like, we could have tweaked it. We could have polished it some more.
Sure. Just walk away, bud.
But I do think that you get lost in that. Then like all the, the rolling cymbals and the creepiness of all this stuff. But yeah, when you start, it does sort of create this like melange of doom. But when you actually like listen to what the thing's saying, it's all bad news.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of sound, I think the same gentleman created that amazing, iconic sound of the camera flash going off at the beginning. And I read Gunnar Hansen's book, Chainsaw Confidential, which is so full of interviews and anecdotes and everything. And he does ask him how he created that sound. He's like, nope, taking that one to the grave. Yeah. Good for you, because that sound is like Darth Vader breathing, or a lightsaber, or the Predator click, or, you know, any of those super, I don't want to say iconic again, but like those sounds in horror or movies in general, that like, you know exactly what that is.
Yeah. And I think it does a good job of letting that sound not, like, the sound adds to it. It doesn't, same with the sound design, where it doesn't lean on it entirely. Like, it wouldn't be the same scare without the mood it's creating, the atmosphere it's creating. And those sounds certainly add to the jump scares, but it's not just like, oh, they're playing that sound again.
Yeah.
Like, you are so immersed in this thing that it feels just as part of anything else. Like, it's either representative of, like the camera flash at the beginning, or the internal states of the people being terrorized. Like, it all just fits.
Yeah, because they do use, they adapt that sound later on and do like more of like a squealy sound when she gets her finger cut, I believe. Yeah, but it's mainly in that opening setup which that opening setup does so much to establish the mood anyway. So you get that creepy sound, you get that terrible but wonderful like yellow and red cinematography with the corpse,
which was all done post-production. Yeah, like they all shot that out, because like Toby Hooper's like, we need more at the beginning, we need something at the beginning, and they went and they shot that. That corpse is disgusting.
It is oppressive looking.
Yeah, it's just gooey. I mean, it feels kind of like what those like low budget Italian zombie monsters are, you know, zombies are going for when they're just like dirty. Yeah. You know, like I'm thinking of Buried Alive. Like, and I love them. I love their crap, or like even Fulci Zombie, like, sure, where they just kind of muddy and whatever. What this is like, this has been baking in the sun for a while. It is jellied, and it's nasty. It's
been dug up and presented in a very purposeful, specific way. It's implied that the hitchhiker did that, you know, and he set it up and he took photos and that kind of stuff. Is that him taking the photo at the beginning, or is that the police? You know,
I took it as that, and like, it again, like, it just seems like it's this deeper symbol thing, but then like, is it, or you know, or is it just either way? This guy, yeah, he's an artist, right? Which got me thinking, like, so we're all in the room that Pam falls into later. Is that all like his work, or do he and Leatherface have crafts at home? Because he's not supposed to leave when Leatherface is at home alone, right? So do they just kill time by doing fun crafts? Rainy day craft book.
I think that's exactly it. Yeah, the two of them, like, because he does, you know, he takes photos, he shows photos to the people in the van, and he's an artist in his own way. Like, I can get behind that.
So was Ed Gein, you know. Exactly. He had a
bone couch.
He had a whole bunch of horrible stuff in his house, where a lot of this sort of the idea for this stuff comes from, is that like, or like soup bowls made out of the tops of skulls. And then again, like, going back to the just that there's nothing, it's just us, and the horrors of the world, indicating, you know, feeding into this stuff. A lot of this, and this was sort of more in the I want to say in the post-production, lends itself a lot to other killings that happened in Texas, the Candyman killings, by this horrible Dean Corll and a couple of his lackeys, and one of which was this guy Elmer Wayne Henley, who basically, like, when he got busted, was all like, well, no, I'm just going to take my punishment like a man. And that kind of weird, twisted morality of like, yeah, but you killed a bunch of people, but now you're like, yeah, but I got to follow the rules now. So I got in trouble for it. Putting that onto the family makes it even scarier. Like,
look what your brother did to that dog.
It's kind of funny, but it feels bad that they're saying that. And it's also kind of ridiculous that, like, that's what you're doing this, and that's what you care about right now. It's chilling.
Yeah. A bit of a reset, but what do we think about our protagonists and the acting, the performances in this? Because, like, I feel like this is, you get your slasher setup, and you get your 5 kids, but like, there's no sex involved, like in most slashers. There's only one person with a distinct personality, and that's Franklin.
Really, yeah.
Who you couldn't do today at all, probably for good reason. I mean, I think that they had very little to work with, and yet, aside from maybe, and this is nitpicky, aside from maybe when they're first exploring the house, and it feels a little improv-y, and they don't know what to do or say, I feel like all of them express fear so well, and it's so chilling, and all of them work. Obviously, Marilyn Burns, the standout towards the end. But like, as far as our cannon fodder goes, they're kind of in and out, but I still like them all somehow. And I don't know why.
I mean, the whole movie very much feels like, in medias res, like you are just dumped in the middle of this. And you really only know, like, from the opening crawl, why they're going to the cemetery. It's just, okay, their grandparents got dug up. We need to make sure it's that. That realization that they're fine kind of happens off camera. You just hear some ADR dialogue that's like, no, he said it was fine. Yeah. And then you don't really, there's no really sitting down to get to know these people. You get these glimpses of them. Like, we get that Pam is very interested in astrology. Jerry doesn't care about it. He's with Sally, who's brothers with Franklin. And Kirk is just kind of like, seems like just a dude. Yeah. But Franklin, when I first saw this, he's so annoying. And like, people on set didn't like him because he was apparently being method. And I always think that's so funny because, like, I don't think I've ever heard of a movie or something where someone's method and everyone's like, it was cool. And I really enjoyed working with them. Or it's always some level of annoyance of like, I'm not calling you RoboCop. You're Peter. Or it's just like, has anybody ever taken a method role where their role was to be super kind to everybody? Yeah. And like overly kind? No, it's only just to be annoying. Yeah. I mean, even Daniel Day-Lewis, like, he gets into his characters. Like, someone asked Paul Thomas Anderson, like, did you like working with Daniel Plainview or what's his name, Woodcock from Phantom Thread? And he was like, look, Daniel was frustrating, but like when he was Woodcock, he'd just be so fussy and whatever about everything. It was really annoying. Yeah. But it's like, look, I know what I can get from this guy, so fine, I'll let him work. But like when you're like, it's the 1970s and I'm, sitting in a hot Texas van, time for me to be method. Fine, man. But I do think Franklin is really key to all this because like he's like the first alive human being we really see. I mean, it's Kirk getting out of the car to get the ramps for him, but like Franklin is insanely vulnerable, not just because he's in a wheelchair, but he's the only one complaining about how hot it is and he's miserable. And he's the one that's set aside from the rest of the group. And then he sees the portents and no one kind of believes him. And even like the more fleshing out we get of him and Sally's relationship is just pieces. We just get like, if you've ever argued with someone and then you kind of realize partway through the argument that like, oh, this isn't even about that. Sure. This is about something else. Yeah. That it feels like we're encountering that argument.
You really didn't want me to come, did you?
Oh, Franklin, I'm just tired. It's been a long day.
There's a larger thing at play here, but they're just kind of discussing this. And I like that they don't spend a lot of time with that they just give us these. Oh, sure. It doesn't, because I suppose it feels less like a movie that way, where it's they're not making, like, I'm Pam and I'm into astrology. Yeah. Oh, that's just like you to say, Pam. Yeah, I don't know. It just feels very, very naturalistic, I guess. And so I think there's not much to these characters, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's lacking for that. Reading Gunnar Hansen's book, he said that he used to meet up with the actor who plays Franklin afterwards, and he was just like, he was a great guy. We ended up becoming friends afterwards, but like everybody hated him so much on set. He would say stuff like, can you push me over there? We'd be like, dude, you have working legs. You can walk. It's fine. Or, he would ask for very specific whiny things on set, like beer or a certain sandwich or something like that, just to play it up. And so he said, like, by the time Leatherface kills Franklin, he was like, I was so ready to just chop him up with a chainsaw in this movie. Yeah. And that's like right before that, when he and Sally are fighting over the fleshlight, basically like Toby Hooper had spent a bunch of time being like, you hear what Sally said about you? Right. You hear what Marilyn Burns said about you? Oh, Marilyn, did you hear what Paul said about you? Like mean girling, his way through it.
That's amateur hour directing, I think.
It's one of these things for me that like you can look at something like this, say, and like not necessarily the same scope as Apocalypse Now, but these things that are like these amazing feats of filmmaking to a degree, and just like the awful situations that created this thing.
Yep.
And you could look at that and go, aha. Or you can go like, okay, what's a better way I could get that effect?
Yeah, what's right. Let's be people here.
Because this is like everyone in all the book, everyone's like, it was an abusive set.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Mm-hmm.
Not only just like with the oppressive heat, and like particularly in the end when they're in the house, it's supposed to take place at night, so they had to black out all the windows, and it's summer in Texas. It's
right,
they're just roasting in there and going insane. All that stuff, but also just like the way Hooper would get performances out of his actors and do stuff was not 100% above board.
Yeah. You can do that whole, like, is it worth it for the art in the end? Yeah. Is it worth it for Stanley Kubrick to be terrorizing Shelley Duvall, even though that's come under some reappraisal? I don't know what to believe with that right now anymore, but like the utter fear in her eyes in The Shining and the utter fear in Marilyn Burns's eyes, is just like, that's what it takes. I'm not sure. But those are memorable. Yeah, right. I don't know.
I think it's also safe to just across the board, don't feed your cast a whole bunch of pot brownies. I think that's also the case. Is a safe bet. That was pretty.
That is not an urban legend, according to Gunnar Hansen. He's just like, people showed up with brownies. We didn't know there was full of hash, and I ate a bunch of them before I had to do a pivotal kill scene, and it was tough.
I just can't imagine like, okay. Yeah, be really high and it's really hot and run around a lot.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not doing that.
No, I'm going to sit down over here and eat this barbecue. All the kids in it are so memorable somehow. And I don't know why. And maybe
I think some of it is also that you don't see them in anything else. I mean, like
that's a big part of it.
Gunnar Hansen has gone on, and you'll see him and stuff almost stunt catching whatever. Marilyn Burns has definitely had some other work.
Yeah,
I haven't seen these people before, and I'm not ever going to again. Mm-hmm. That there's not really like names that came out of this. Like you're not watching Friday the 13th. Like, oh, there's Kevin Bacon.
Right.
Granted, it's a lot of the same kind of thing where some of these actors stopped acting or went on to do other things.
Mm-hmm. Stopped acting after they were like, I'm not working on movies if that's what that set is like.
It sucked. Yeah. But it does feel, I don't know, something about this, it feels different in this in a way I can't necessarily quantify, where I think it's because that gritty, like, does this seem like a snuff film kind of thing.
Right.
Makes that a little bit more memorable.
Now, crossing the dividing line now, the family. So Gunnar Hansen had never done a film before, or he was like an extra accidentally in something. I only read, his book about it, but evidently he was primarily interested in poetry and fiction, and he just wanted to be a big, sweet, bearded dude and write poetry. And that's all he wanted to do. And he thought acting might be kind of fun. And so he got cast as Leatherface, which set the course of his life to some degree, but he still managed to become like a primary editor on various like poetry magazines after this. And he just seems like one of those classic gentle giant type of guys. He didn't do a ton of acting after this. And usually, like you said, it was kind of like more stunt casting for what that's worth. The others, like I know the guy who played Grandpa was just like, I don't want to do 13 hours of makeup anymore. So if that's what acting is like, nuts to this.
Well, Alan Danziger, that was Jerry, was like, I'm a social worker. I just kind of did this for fun.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go back to doing that.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff. But I mean, the performances of the family are so off the wall insane that I only laugh a little bit when it actually is kind of funny, but I still find them all so uncanny and distressing. From the moment they pick up the hitchhiker, that is such a great example of like, oh my God, we invited the wrong guy to the party. And now it's going to happen.
Well, and it's a feeling that I don't want to just cut on him specifically, but it's the first thing that came to mind. It's a feeling that like, I feel like Rob Zombie tries to get a lot and just can't
100%
tamp it down enough.
Yeah.
To get that. Cause I think while they're all these extreme weirdos, there's a lot of subtlety to them. Like when we first see Leatherface, he does like the first couple kills. He's this, hulking maniac and it's terrifying. But then like when he goes to the window and is like freaking out, like, who are these people coming to the house, whatever.
It's one of my favorite parts of the movies.
There's just like vulnerability there that you're like uncomfortable with, like what's happening here. And then later in the film, when he's like, oh, he's getting abused by this old weirdo and all stuff, like then the power dynamic is all different. Even the hitchhiker at the beginning is creepy, but you don't necessarily think it's going to be that. You know, it's sort of, you're afraid if that's what hitchhikers are going to be. But then at first he's just kind of off-putting and, you know, not picking up social cues, and which is totally fine and normal. And I'm cool. But but yeah, when he starts, you know, stabbing Franklin or whatever, kind of Franklin, then it gets a little weird. And even like, I really was taken with Jim Sidow's performance in this time.
Oh my God.
As the cook, because like he's the worst of the bunch for not being the killer or whatever. His shift that like when Sally escapes from when Sally escapes from Leatherface and like into the gas station to him, like this familiar face. And this is also the issue I have with the idea that there was a symbol on the side that kind of identified the cook, is we never see him see that symbol.
Sure.
The door is open when they get to the van, and he's trying to warn them away from going up the Franklin place. He doesn't want them anywhere around it.
Well, now look, you boys don't want to go mess around no old house. Well, those things is dangerous. You're liable to get hurt.
We'll be careful.
If you don't want to go fooling around other folks' property, some folks don't like it, and they don't mind showing you.
When it becomes clear, like, okay, I've got a situation on my hands, and he has just revealed that he's evil, he's in on it. His casual cruelty is the worst.
Yes.
Like when he's just driving with her in the car and just like poking her with the stick, and still like reassuring her, like, oh, it's going to be all fine. Hitting her and also sort of realizing like, yeah, I like this. This is fun.
Right.
It's just awful. It just feels so bad.
Well,
and I love it.
And I love what that sequence represents, which is based completely around his performance, which is Sally has just run a whole bunch, which she'll be doing a lot for the rest of the movie. She runs from the Franklin death. We think that she's found solace in the barbecue joint, the gas station that we've seen before. And then the slow turn when we realize that she's no longer safe. And so it's not just her, but it's the audience just going, oh God. Like, oh no, here we go.
Like into like depths of madness, unprepared for at this point.
Right. And also, for what it's worth, Jim Sidow is evidently the biggest sweetheart on set, because every time he beat the crap out of her with a broom handle, he would just be like, I'm so sorry. Like, are you okay? I don't want to be doing this. He would just keep saying to her. And, you know, she would have to be the professional and just be like, nah, keep hitting me.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah. At one point, when they're in the truck, Marilyn Burns had just had enough. And so her stunt double came in, and she was just like, you don't even see me in the sack. And so like the stunt double like got in the sack, and that's her getting hit. I mean, that's what their job is, but still.
I also heard stories of like when she like jumped through the window at the end, they're like, we're going to have the stunt double do that.
Yeah.
But then when they got the outside shot, they like dropped her from a higher, you know,
still had to have like a reaction. God. Yeah. God.
Yeah. It's just, come on, man.
Yeah.
But it also sucks. And I don't like about myself that I read these books about like these awful conditions. And I'm like, yeah, filmmaking's fun. It's like, I hate being on set.
Right.
And this stuff's work. But it's that, how can we make this work? I don't know. I always kind of like that.
Right. Oh, well, sometimes I watch it and I'm just like, oh yeah, I sure did film a corporate commercial last weekend. I also did not drop a stunt lady out of a window, you know, and worried about her safety.
I am morally superior for it.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's a huge deal. Their growing relationship, and like what some of that might mean. The fact that there's not, other than that corpse, there is not a woman on that property.
Yeah.
That's what's going on there. There's Grandpa. Is the cook dad? Is the cook a brother? It's really amorphous.
I take the cook as dad, just personally, and then the brothers are Hitchhiker and Leatherface, because Cook does seem to, at the dinner sequence, he does have some authority, but then of course Hitchhiker starts like bucking that authority.
Right. He's also the only one that gets like that gets physically violent with them. You know, like they don't necessarily hit each other. He's the only one that does that.
Right. Well, and after that scene, he picks up the hitchhiker in front of the high beams of the truck too, and takes him home. So like takes him home like a petulant child.
The family is just all super strange in wonderfully terrifying ways. And going back to that reveal that Sidehausen on it is just, I think is amazing for this movie. I think I could see us in a lesser movie. And we've sort of talked about this before. There's other examples of where it's like, okay, and then she runs this way, and then she runs that way. Where it's like, that's a huge section of this movie is her running and being chased by Leatherface, like being terrorized, but it works. It's like you're in it, and you're feeling the terror of that moment. And I think when she gets to the gas station, and just the way that scene is played out, a lot of it in a larger wide shot of Jim Sidow kind of going like, okay, what's going on? All right, we're gonna go get the cops. But like his demeanor like keeps subtly ratcheting up,
sure,
and becoming creepier and creepier, and it's just fantastic.
When they're running around too, or when she's running around, and I don't know if I'm reaching for this or not, but like I like thinking about the geography of where we're at a little bit, because you get the shot of the cars underneath the tarp. I believe there's another building on the property too that we like kind of briefly see. Yeah. There's a swimming hole, there's the barbecue, which makes it feel a little bit more of like a kind of community than just a house full of weirdos. And that to me adds a little bit more to the folk horror idea of, instead of just stumbling onto a family, you're stumbling onto like a whole community of weirdos.
Yeah.
Granted, your weirdos are living at the house and also running the barbecue / gas station place, but still it feels like a little bit more expansive, than just one home that we're running around.
Yeah. That's a world which the house is fantastic. I feel like, of course, we have to talk about the shot.
Good God. Yes.
It's so great. And I remember watching it for the first time. There's a shot, assuming 45 minutes into this podcast that you've seen this movie before. Yeah. The shot when Pam gets up off the porch swing, and like walks towards the house. It's funny because, I mean, as a teen seeing this movie, I'm like, oh, yeah, just a nice butt shot, because I'm looking at her butt because I'm a teenager. Earlier in the movie, there's a shot of her and Sally like getting Coca-Cola, and it's the same like low shot of just butts.
Right.
But there's also something uncomfortable about it. It's not just titillation because she's like futzing with the machine, and there's like an urgency to it that feels bad. But so in this moment, it feels almost like that there's definitely like titillation there. But as she's walking towards the house, it's the camera is like on dolly, but like keeping a pace with her. And the house just seems to grow and envelop.
Yes.
And even when like she like tries to run away and Leatherface chases after her, and you get that like it's so bright and white out there, and he just pulls her back inside. Again, it's not something that's like heavily leaned on, but they just like let the location do the work and let you kind of just experience that, and don't go like, notice how bright and white it is. Are you getting that? That shot is amazing, and allegedly, like Steven Spielberg asked cinematographer Daniel Pearl about it. Oliver Stone has asked about it.
Evidently, Spielberg, I think, was on the set of 1943. Just shut down the production when he found out that Daniel Pearl was on set. There's 80 people standing around. Yeah. He's just like, so how did you do that shot? And it's basically, from what I remember reading, is just like they lifted up the swing set. Like it's a very simple, low budget. We're putting on a show with what we've got, and it became this terrifically familiar shot. Like for a long time, people were saying it was like the greatest dolly shot in cinema history. Daniel and Toby were on set arguing with the producers because the producers didn't want to spend the time to do that shot. And there was a total face off. Like, we're going to fire you as producers if you do that shot. And the director's like, well, if you don't let us do this shot, we'll walk off. And what do you got? So what ended up happening was a terrific, memorable shot of horror, or of any genre.
Yeah, I think ultimately what cinematographers want is to have a standalone, just awesome shot, an awesome achievement while also filming a butt.
I mean, sure. I'm willing to bet, my memory does not serve me very well right now, but I'm willing to bet that when we watch the remake produced by Michael Bay,
I'm sure it's going to have the same subtlety.
It's going to have same subtlety and everything. It's not going to be a flowing skirt. It's not going to be butt centric, all that. The last thing about that shot that I love so much is just the fact that she is wearing a backless shirt, which just comes so into play for the meat hook scene.
Yeah.
I almost said, well, I'm going to say it, but you could not have asked for a better shirt for a meat hook impaling.
Right. Again, just that exposed flesh of like,
right.
You know, like, oh, not that it would hurt less if you were wearing a shirt. You would be going like, oh, shoo, she's wearing a regular shirt.
Right.
But it's like, it just is. It's flesh on hook either way, but it does feel more vulnerable and exposed.
So let's talk about that for a minute or two, because that to me, besides the dinner scene, which I feel like we have to end on, but like the meat hook scene is the most brutal thing in the movie to me. As has been said so many times, you don't see the hook go into the flesh, and I think it's better for it. My favorite part about that whole shot, well, two things. One, the selling of the performance of her like grabbing to the top of the hook, trying to hoist herself off the hook is so incredibly brutal.
It's rough.
The way that she screams somehow, it just sounds desperate. But mostly the fact that as soon as Leatherface does that, he turns to Kirk, starts up the chainsaw and starts prepping Kirk's body. So like, he's not even enjoying a kill. He doesn't care.
Right.
This is meat. This is just it. And there's something about the way that the camera, it does a big zoom out, I think, and you see the foreground of Kirk and Leatherface and her in the background just struggling on the hook. And you think it's the most brutal thing you've ever seen, not a drop of blood.
Yeah, which is wild. I was talking to a friend of the show, Anime on VHS UK, who was talking about how, and I forgot this, that it was banned in the UK until like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's so wild because it's like, there's not a lot of gore in this, but it's like, no, it was just too evil. They went, no thanks.
Well, I can't remember if we've already talked about this, but Hooper thought that he was going to get a PG rating.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is just absolutely insane to me. He was just like, he was on the phone with ratings boards while they were filming, just saying like, hey, look, I'm going to be sending you a movie. There's no blood in it. He thought that he'd get a PG rating for the sake of distribution. Now, granted, this is before 1982, 1984, where there was a PG-13 rating. So it was either PG or R. The hubris of this man to think that he could get a PG rating out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is just wild to me.
Like it is just that sort of the whole vibe of this movie, just how it feels like there's a not to get too heady about it, there's a filmmaker, Kenneth Anger, huge influence on Nicholas Winding Refn, among others, but sort of counterculture experimental filmmaker. And I was thinking about, because I'd watched fairly recently after he died, the Incantation for My Demon Brother, I think it's called, where the whole movie like feels like it's supposed to be a spell of sorts. Like like it starts with three circles in a triangular fashion with one on top, two on the bottom, and then it ends with that circle inverted, with those circles inverted, and it kind of feels like, oh, something just happened here.
Oh,
like
sure.
Some spell or intention just happened as a result of this movie. And this movie sort of has that same kind of feeling, like, I just feel like I've unleashed something onto the world. There's something like sprung up out of this, and that doesn't feel good.
Or even like, I remember us talking about the Netflix remake, which of course we'll get to, unfortunately.
Yep.
And I can't remember the context of the article or whatever, but it was just, to me, it's less about conjuring or unleashing. It's about turning over a rock and seeing something that, oh my God, there's something under here. Yeah. Like it's less me doing it on purpose, and it's me doing it accidentally, like falling into this situation and looking over this rock in the desert, and oh my God, can we please put this rock back as fast as possible?
Yeah, and it's something we're going to find, like, going forward, is that you could not make, in my estimation, it'd be very hard to make a decent sequel to this movie and keep the same vibe, because so much of this is the terror of discovering this stuff, and like, you don't even know what this is, or like what is even going on, because you eventually have to explain stuff. Right. You eventually have to give it some sort of place and understanding. Otherwise, you're just doing the same thing again. While Leatherface is an iconic figure, certainly a integral part of this whole thing, I think the focus, from what I remember of the sequels, is like the focus on Leatherface, I think, leaves a lot of other stuff behind. And certainly Jim Sydow is in the next one, and Bill Moseley is Chop Top. Great thing, but I think that it's never like you can't just focus on Leatherface, because I think there's a lot there with Leatherface, but I think Leatherface needs to exist in the continuum of this weird world, because like Leatherface is putting on different faces and makeup and stuff like that. Just is just like this nightmarish thing that you can speculate about, but you don't know. And I like that a lot about this movie, is that there's a lot of just horror presented for you to kind of figure out on your own. It's like just gives you enough to speculate on, but doesn't. It's not just like, oh, now he's dressed like an evil clown now, because isn't that spooky? Right. Yeah. There's a sort of weird continuity to it all.
I feel like we need to get into the dinner scene of it all. I did a lot of thinking about, again, because I've watched this movie numerous times, but like in my brain, this movie or this scene is about a half hour long, which is not the case at all. It's about 8 minutes long, which you can chalk that up to amazing editing and pacing and all that kind of thing. But this was a 27-hour day, which typically you work 10 hours on a film set, maybe 12. Probably more realistic. Once they were in there and they wanted it dark the entire time, so they had to black out the curtains to keep continuity. Tobe Hooper wanted to do point of view shots from everybody, and it needed to be anchored around Sally, which makes sense and it makes it horrific. But I just want to read from a quick passage from Gunnar Hansen's book, and this goes to any of you who really wants to know, like, I was going to say how the sausage is made, but that's particular for Texas Chainsaw. So usually I don't read directly from a text, but I think this is interesting. So to get the footage that he wanted, Tobe Hooper decided we needed at least 10 perfect takes of the entire 6-minute dinner table scene. If we assume that the actors were close to flawless and the equipment problems non-existent, which never happens, my very conservative guess would be that we still had to shoot 2 to 3 takes to get each perfect one. That means that to shoot the dining room table section, we would need at least 25 or 30 takes. That means that taking from the top of the scene to the end, from, I believe, 8 different perspectives, you need to do about 30 takes of that. And keeping that level of energy the entire time, which is just fucking insane to me. Yeah. I mean, especially, you usually focus on the final girl because she's the one getting tortured. And of course, she's the MVP no matter what in this. Like, her scream throughout is insane. But even the hitchhiker and Jim Sydow are like playing it at 11 the entire time. And how you can do that for 27 hours is just astounding. Everybody just said that there was just like meat on the table. It was stinking. They basically walked outside to get fresh air and vomit and walk back in. Movies, everyone, movies.
Yeah. One of the assistant camera people was talking about like how there was a shot where like Leatherface approaches the camera and he was like, I would have to hit the focus mark because he's part of the job. The assistant camera is to run the focus on the camera. And so like they'll mark out like where, okay, so step up here, it needs to be at this setting, whatever. So it's like, I'll just watch it, hit that mark, and then lean my head out the window so that I don't have to smell him, because he apparently was pretty rank. But yeah, there was like rotting because again, Bob Burns had all this amazing like dead architect, dead stuff that he had sculpted and turned into stuff. So that was really stinky, and this is a hot Texas house, and it's just nasty.
And poor Gunnar was just like, they only gave him one version of his wardrobe to wear the entire time. Yep. And so by this point, it was just off the wall terrible. And so not only did Tobe keep him isolated from the rest of the cast because he wanted that classic monster movie, like the first time you see Leatherface is going to be a real reaction. So they kept poor guy off to the side the entire time. But by that point, he was not only ostracized from the cast, but the crew didn't want to be around him because he stank so bad. And he was wearing like leather on his face legitimately. Poor guy. He was just like, by the end of the shoot, he also couldn't walk well because he was wearing like boot elevation. So he was already a tall guy, but they put him up to like 6'4" or 6'7" or something like that. Jeez. He could barely walk. So by this point, he was having such a miserable experience that He said by late in the day, 25 hours, 26 hours, and all the screaming and all the haranguing and getting everybody into character, he said, like, there was a 10-second moment where I wanted to kill Sally, where I was just like, I was in that messed up headspace. He's like, of course I wouldn't do it, but like I touched the void there for a second.
It becomes a reasonable solution,
right?
That's
to
when it gets
end
scary.
all of this, yeah.
Like I'd be done, and and you're just being told constantly, hit her, get her. That's
right,
yeah.
So they wheel down Grandpa, which I love this character so much.
And like it's this makeup is not great, but I love it.
Oh,
like because it's like not great. I think it works. Like it feels
uncanny.
Yeah, uncanny is great.
Yeah, evidently it took him hours to go through this makeup. Dude was not very interested in being an actor after this series. But the biggest part about this was just that idea of wheeling Grandpa out. There's that disgusting idea of cutting Sally's fingertip, putting it in his mouth so he can suckle the blood. That blood packet just was not going off, so they literally cut Marilyn Burns' fingertip without her knowing. Big ass no on set.
Did they even realize? Did he even know he was doing it, or was it just like fuck it, I don't care?
It was the latter, and Gunnar did it, and he seems like such a gentle man, but he was just like, at that point, we just had to keep going, and the effect wasn't working, so I cut her finger. So that was a genuine shot and reaction. But then, yes, that leads into the very famous, and I don't care, it's so funny and it's so horrific at the same time, of the best killer in the family who just can't make that last kill. Yeah, that they're just, again, like they're just so fixated on these old ways. They're like, no, we'll have Grandpa do it. And they don't care if it doesn't go right away because they're terrorizing this woman, which again, like is going back to your point about there being no sex in the movie, that like that doesn't even come up. I think she says at one point, she's like, I'll do anything. And they just laugh. Anything. Yeah. Like, this isn't about that. Like, I do not care. Which is also like terrifying in its own way, that like we're so even beyond what you would expect from these kind of people. I hate this, but I feel like I can't just have it in my head. When Grandpa is suckling on her finger and there's like the faraway shot and he's sort of moving his arms, 'cause he's supposed to be kind of like a baby. He looks like when Trump dances. When he just like stands there and kind of pumps his arms. I couldn't help but think of that. And sorry, but I just couldn't. Done. I'm going to pull that scene up after this just to rewatch. Yeah, but it's that weird kind of, but anyway, not to get political. Yeah. My partner and I do that dance around the house frequently. Oh. Yeah. But I couldn't help but think about that. Just rot in my brain. Mm-hmm. But that like, well, Grandpa's the best killer. Let's have him do it. And he's dropping the hammer a whole bunch, but it's fine. Like, because we're still having fun. We're doing things together as a family. Yeah, isn't that nice? Yeah, we've put aside our differences and we've come together. And it's only when the hitchhiker is like, all right, let me do it, that Sally finds her opening to break out. Well, and preceding this, Cook says, I don't take no pleasure in killing. But then he finally comes back around as if it's just like, well, if Grandpa's on the scene, I can get into this. Yeah. Well, I don't want to do it, but I will absolutely enjoy you doing it. Right. Yeah. I don't know if him hitting her in the car was supposed to be some sort of awakening for him. Hey, this feels all right. Oh. I can get into this. I'm back to this. Yeah. I can do something besides hit my own family. I also like you talk about thinking about the geography of this place. Yeah. When she jumps out of the window and it's day, it's like, why wouldn't it be? You know, like there's no indication of how much time has passed because she kind of passes out at one point or whatever. Agreed. Yeah. But just the idea that they've just been up all night doing this, it makes it so much worse. And even he even says at one point, I think you can kind of hear Jim Sidow say, I have to open up the shop in the morning. Oh, yeah, yeah. Which is just like, imagine that guy going back to work that day. Right. But it's still just the idea that it's morning now is just so fitting. Not, I'm sure is like, well, technically it seems like this much time has passed, but it is just that this night you've just moved beyond any sort of reality, that the finally like breaking out of it, you would absolutely be in daylight. Why not? Yeah. I mean, that's one of my absolute favorite, not used very often, like kind of horror ideas, is the being displaced in time. Yeah. And just like having a loss of sense of time, because that scares the hell out of me for whatever dumb reason. But like, Yeah, she goes to sleep or goes to sleep. She passes
she gets tuckered out
in fear and wakes up.
She calls timeout.
Yeah, and it could be hours. Maybe granted, I eat dinner at 5:30. I like my early senior citizen dinner. These guys might not eat dinner until like well past midnight or whatever, but still, how long
could
are they like?
Meal.
It could. Ooh, I do love a fourth. I do love a fourth meal.
The idea.
Yes,
they're like, wait a minute, I just got the greatest idea,
and we can't
actually murder people. Okay, well that aside, like we can still serve food late though, right?
Right.
All right.
So, when she jumps out the window and it is pure daylight, to me that is terrifying because it is the idea of like, how long have you been in there? How long have you been absent of your faculties? That's scary to me. Also, if we're talking about meat for a second, this time through it occurred to me, I don't know how long it takes to prepare sausage or meat or cure it or anything. Do you think any of the meat on the table was Kirk and Jerry?
I don't know. I mean, it could be because in theory, you could just
grind it up,
stuff it, and then grind it up, put it in the casing, and boom, there you go. Like I don't know about the aging or whatever, but it does seem like there's more of an artistry to it than that. If you are a sausage maker, I don't sound off the comments. I have no idea.
Get in touch because I'd love to sample your wares too. But
well, unless you are part of the Leatherface family, who were initially called the Slaughters, and this one they're like. Like there's a sign that says W.E. Slaughter.
Sure.
And ha 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 ha. And that level of comedy will come into play in the second one for sure.
Yes.
But all the meat in this movie is disgusting.
It's terrible.
Like, when they get that stuff at the beginning, the barbecue at the beginning, and Franklin's just got that thing and it looks like a dick.
Yeah.
Like that he's just sort of chewing on, sticking out of his mouth. It's gnarly and mottled. It looks terrible.
I do think that the cow meat or the animal meat versus human meat thing is extremely apparent in this movie. And I was vegetarian for about 17 years. I've been eating meat again recently, and boy, this movie makes me rethink my choices occasionally. For sure, it doesn't hit you over the head with it necessarily. I mean, there's shots early on of a slaughterhouse, and then again, just like Leatherface putting someone on a meat hook and then preparing another body. He's just going about it like you would a cow, and
oh, just how like cold and they talk about that the death about like
Grandpa's the best killer there ever was. I never took more than one lick, they say. I did 60 in 5 minutes once. Say, could have done more if the hook and pull gang could have gotten the beeves out of the way faster.
Dehumanizing. I mean, I know it's animals, but that sort of removal of morality and thinking about it and just the industrialization of it all. That's just. And now that they are out of jobs at the slaughterhouse, that's still like all they know. And just go up to that door and be like, learn to code.
Yeah.
And see where that gets you.
God. Guillermo del Toro evidently went vegetarian after watching this movie.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he saw it at a young age, but
yeah. I mean, I remember when I watched it in high school and was showing all my friends, like I had some friends that were vegetarians and they did not enjoy the movie.
Yeah. You'd think that they would get on board and just be like, see, and get all preachy about it.
I think there was a certain amount of like, now you see why.
Right.
I think I was more interested in just being an asshole about it. Look at this stuff makes you uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah, it's a part of the movie that I don't think is. I don't even remotely think that it's subtext. It's purely text, and it's one of those things where like I have complicated feelings about it too, and I agree. It's right there.
I will say this again, going back to my family living in my. Grandparents living in Scotts Bluff. We went to go visit them one time, and they was by a sugar beet factory. And the smell in the morning of them burning sugar beets was so disgusting, like you'd want to throw up. So it's not much better. The vegetable stuff. So it's more just factories, I guess, with the bad news. And this is, again, what I love about this movie. Sally jumps out the window.
Yeah.
She's trying to escape. The hitchhiker's chasing after her, and like it's obvious he's catching up to her. And so, but he's not just grabbing her. He's slashing at her back with a razor.
It's so
which is just
rough.
Again, just more terror. And she finally gets out on the road, and a truck, the Black Maria, stops.
Love it.
Well, it hits him. It hits the hitchhiker, so he's gone. But Leatherface is still chasing her. The guy gets out, And like Leatherface, he's immediately like, oh, screw this. Because Leatherface is chasing him. They run around the truck a little bit. Finally, he throws a wrench, which I guess was made out of balsa wood.
Totally.
At Leatherface.
Clocks
and
him.
Yeah, falls and cuts his leg. That's like the most gore in the movie. And it was, he was wearing a metal plate like wrapped around his leg. And then they put a stake on top of that. And then when he cuts his leg, he still burned his leg because of the heat. They filed down the chains on the chainsaw. And when he hit his leg, it still like generated enough heat that it burned his leg a little bit. But then she's able to hop into the back of a speeding pickup while Black Maria guy chases away and just heard insane laughter, which rewinding back real quick, because I want to talk about this earlier. Speaking of laughter, at the beginning when they're in the Franklin house and Franklin is sort of apart from them, all their like laughter and mirth, whatever, sounds terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
It's like otherworldly and just sounds like, is someone sobbing? Is someone laughing? It's hard to tell. So again, laughter, any laughter in this movie, with the exception of Kirk telling Franklin that he was crazier than the hitchhiker.
Oh, yeah.
That's the only moment where you're like, ha, I remember what humor is.
Yeah.
The rest of it, awful. But yeah, her laughter at the end, it's so fitting that the tagline for this movie on the posters was, who will survive and what will be left of them? Mm-hmm. Because there is nothing left of Sally.
Yeah.
She is destroyed. And I've always liked that. Friday the 13th, part 3, touches that on that a little bit because the end of the movie, the final girl is insane.
Yep.
She just went through this experience and she's not like, whew, what a day. Like,
yeah,
she just is this insane laughter and it doesn't seem like she's good. It doesn't seem like things are solved. And then Leatherface does this weird, like this dance with the chainsaw. That's like, is he upset? Is this like this orgiastic joy? I don't know. But the fact that it just cuts. Mm-hmm. You just are thrown out of the movie. Amazing. Yeah. Like there's no sense of closure about the whole thing. It's just, all right, I just showed you some horror. Get out of here. Get out. I mean, in theory, yeah, she went to the cops and the cops went and got them, or like they cleared out, or, they fought and killed each other. Who knows? It doesn't, you don't know.
Yeah.
Well, they're still out there waiting to get you.
So the rock has been put back into the soil. There's still stuff underneath there.
You just wrote "do not lift" on the rock. You didn't solve it. You just wrote "do not lift."
That's the least that we can do. Two things from Gunner's book was evidently the chainsaw gag going into his leg at the end that you just described. He was the most concerned through the entire shoot because obviously it's a chainsaw going into him, not somebody else. So he kept asking Toby, so did you figure out how we're going to do that gag yet? He's like, we'll figure it out. All he said for the longest time. Finally got to the day. They still didn't have a plan. And so they were going to have somebody else on set take the chainsaw and go through the meat and then down to the steel plate. And Gunner is like, nope, I will not do that.
Yeah,
he's like,
absolutely not.
Of course not. He goes, I'm the one that's been handling this chainsaw the entire time. Let me do it. Like, we can angle it so that I can carefully go through the meat. And he said it was still terrifying, like he was sawing off his own leg, but they went through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus. Like, I mean, low budget filmmaking, you don't have stunts, you don't have safety, but still, like, there's just this, like, we're gonna like tell one of our leads, like, oh, we'll figure it out on the day. Yeah. That's
not cool.
Not okay. The other bit from Gunner at that end when he was doing the dance, he couldn't see anybody in his peripheral vision, and he was literally running around with the chainsaw. And so there was like 3 or 4 people. There was a sound operator, there was like 2 camera operators, and there was Toby in this tiny cluster of a group just trying to watch him. And Gunner said by that point, he was so pissed off at Toby Hooper. He was like, I'm going to scare him as much as I can on purpose. And he kind of went at the director a lot with a live chainsaw. Mm-hmm. Don't know how much of that is in the final film, but you can feel the intensity for sure. And he also, Dakota was just like, I was also a baton twirler in a marching band when I was in high school. I think that helped me in this, which I think is so sweet.
Giant baton twirler.
He was a baton man.
What a sensitive man.
But no, I agree. This is the greatest of all time, hands down, no question, final girl escape. I'm not saying that it's the most triumphant. I'm just saying it's the most like realistic to me. Her performance is so off the charts good. Like, I don't even know how you could do that better. And just, this is not going to be okay for her. And the monster is still out there.
Right. I mean, because it bucks the trend of the Final Girl, where it's as far as Carol Clover's estimation, where it's like you sort of either become the villain or use the villain's weapons against them, or like that. It is just, no, you just made it through. You just you caught an opening and you went for it. You didn't outsmart or really change in any way. You just got brutalized and you made it out. Yeah. And that's the best any of us can hope for.
And bucks the trend in the sense that this was before the trend.
Right. Yes.
You know, it was like it's pure luck. I'm not saying that.
So you could also argue that the trend became like in response to that, you know, that it was like, oh, but what if she fought back?
Fair, you know, and you know, you could argue that, I mean, you can definitely argue that Sally, though her performance is great, I like her character, all that kind of stuff. It's pure blind luck that she got out of this. It is not her using her skills like in Jason or Freddy or anything like that. She's just damn lucky to be alive, kiddo, as they say in Aliens.
That's what I mean about sort of the signs and portents being emptiness, that it's just like, it was just luck. You found, I mean, she was obviously trying to get out, but like opportunity is when preparedness meets knowledge. I don't know what the line is, but you know what I'm saying.
Robert Evans says luck is when preparedness meets opportunity.
There you go.
Yeah.
And he wasn't crooning, baby, or whatever. There is no, like you said, there's no triumph. There is just escape. And you don't walk out of the movie being like, "Ooh, that was close." It was just still going. It's all still going.
Yeah. Well, I think that we can honor our dead right now. Surprisingly few chainsaw deaths in this. Kirk, played by William Vale, smashed in the head with sledgehammer. Pam, played by Terry McMinn, hoisted on meat hook, put in a freezer. Jerry, played by Alan Danziger, smashed in the head with sledgehammer. Franklin, played by Paul A. Partain, sliced up by chainsaw. The Hitchhiker, played by Edwin Neal, hit by semi-truck. Only one chainsaw death, I think. Franklin.
Yeah, it's just Franklin.
Yeah. Considering it was
the other ones
Massacre.
get massacred with chainsaws after the fact.
Afterwards, I like that this movie is back around having a significant effect on me, because there was a point in time where a friend of the show, Michael Holloway, and I, who is going to be on during this series, he and I watched this when we used to live together. We watched it every 6 weeks for a good chunk of time or so. We were so into this movie. And by the time we finally saw it at the Clinton Street Theater in Portland, when they had an anniversary showing or something, we walked out of it and we were like, the dinner scene still, it's pretty okay. And so I was just like, I need to put this down for a while and I need to be resensitized to this movie. And that's where I'm at now.
It was like you said, we tend to watch these movies multiple times before we talk about them. And like, it was hard going back for that second bite, just because like not just because I've seen it a bunch of times, but because like it is such, I don't want to say it's a weightier experience than say your Blood Wings Pumpkinhead 2, where it's, or whatever. Yeah. But it's still like, it still has tremendous power. Like I said before, like I've seen this a bunch. I've read a lot about it, and obviously I'm a fan of it, but it still packs a punch.
I don't know if you've listened to all this and you haven't watched this movie. I can't stress enough. Like,
you blew it. Sorry. Should have put a disclaimer on the front.
Sorry. But
sorry.
Yeah. But I bet it would still be effective even if you threw it on now. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, it remains arguably the greatest horror movie of all time.
It's up there for me.
In the top 5, I think, and it's an important one, and I can't wait to get into the sequels. So
yeah, I've been very tempted to get. There's a box set of all the sequels that looks like the Black Maria truck.
Oh, I've had my eye on that.
Yeah,
yes,
I keep talking myself out of it.
Yeah.
But,
so. Which of I think we covered this last time, but which of the sequels have you seen, or do you remember?
I have seen 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
And a long time ago. I've seen 2 fairly recently. 3 I have not seen in years, but then I've seen bits of The Next Generation, and then I've missed all of the Michael Bay ones and the subsequent ones after that. Then the Netflix one I've unfortunately seen.
Right. Yeah, I've seen 1 by far and away the most. 2 I've definitely seen a fair amount, but I'm looking forward to rewatching that one for sure. 3 and 4 I don't remember, but I know I've watched them. And then I've only seen the Michael Bay, the first remake. After that, I don't remember if I've watched those or not, except for the Netflix one. But
I am a little bit more interested in going to the remix of this, because this is one of those where go ahead, like you can't touch this.
Yeah.
So I'm just excited to see what you come up with, because it's not going to be whatever this is. So fine, you have leeway to just do whatever, because you're never going to, in my estimation, come close to this. So I can probably appreciate the different versions for different reasons.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to seeing some of those remakes. And I know that they'll be all like gritty and like have that 2000s lighting and that kind of stuff, which I get annoyed with. But I don't know. I'm interested in seeing it. I'm most excited to rewatch 3 and 4. But I know from here on out, we can't expect these movies. Like, this is going to be like a long way from Baghead situation. Yeah. And I'm okay with that. Like, that's kind of what I signed up for.
I wouldn't want more of the same of this. Like I said, I don't think you could, but it's also, I'm ready for it to be a movie now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. Instead of this unsettling grime that we sat in for a long time.
Yeah. Evil made film.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Let us know what you thought of this. Were there any first time watchers? And again, in the horror community, that's not a bad thing. I envy you. Like, how awesome is that for you to watch that for the first time? And like, let us know what you thought about it. I'd love to hear any initial thoughts, especially in this day and age of what a 1974 grimy movie. Is this still like super intense for you? Let us know.
Yeah, like so many things have drawn from this. Like, does it still, am I just riding the wave of nostalgia?
Right.
Or does it still have the same kind of punch?
The same effect.
I mean, I'd like to think so. Like when it was several years ago now, but when we saw it on the big screen at the Hollywood Theater in Portland, Oregon, which is by far my favorite theater in the world, my partner hadn't seen it before. And so it was a thing.
Yeah. In the theater, hearing that audio is just, wow.
Great opportunity. If you can see it on the big screen, go and do.
All right, everyone. So fire up your chainsaw for part 2 in a couple of weeks. We should be having a special guest that I'm sure you've enjoyed before. But in the meantime, find us on Instagram at This May Hurt a Bit Pod and Hurt a Bit Pod on YouTube, and email us at thismayhurtabit@gmail.com. And until then, we'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night. This has been a Caretaker Press production. It was produced by James Strayer and edited by John C. Myers. Logo by Ethan Kimberling and music by Michael Arthur Holloway, who you can find on Bandcamp. Follow us on Instagram at thismayhurtabitpod and email us at thismayhurtabitpod@gmail.com. Give us a 5-star review over on your favorite podcast app, and we'll see you next time.